Hi everyone, it's Juan and welcome back to another video. Today I am filming a new kind of video, something that I have never done before, so let's see how it goes. Today I'm going to talk about the top 10 books I hope to read in 2021. And I am so excited about this, you have no idea. The reason I haven't made this video in previous years is that I did not used to plan my reading so far in advance. However, because I can be a mood reader and can have a penchant for going down rabbit holes, I decided to become more focused this year. So what would normally happen before is that I would read a book, say by a specific author or from a specific genre or country, and if I enjoyed it, I would then look for more like it. So I would read books by the same author or from the same country in succession. It is not like I did not have a TBR. I do have long lists of books I hope to read someday, pretty much anything in the Western canon, also the masterpieces in the languages I can read, so English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Catalan. And just reading books belonging to those categories would be enough to last me a lifetime. I mean, I will never be able to read all of that, right? So I must be selective and I must choose my reading material carefully. By the way, I have other criteria as well. There are specific writers that I also hope to read that are not part of the so-called canon. And my interest develop, shift, and expand as I get older and as my reading gets wider. That means that my reading list keeps growing, and if I sound like I'm complaining, I am really not. I love having so much to choose from, and I also love discovering new books and authors. Anyway, this year I decided to create a new reading list. I looked at my previous lists and thought about what I would like to focus on for this year. So not only did I complete a list of titles, but also I came up with an order I want to follow. Recently, I reviewed the order because 3 months into the year, I have had enough reading experience following that list to work out what works better for me. I think that having a list helps. It definitely helps me focus on my reading goals. So it is something that I would recommend. I think though that first you will need to define what your reading goals are. For example, ask yourself, do you want to read a specific author or a specific genre? Are there countries or languages or cultures you would want to read from? Do you want to focus on translated literature? Perhaps there are themes or topics you want to read up on, or perhaps you just want to focus on a time period like the Victorian era, or a literary movement like modernism or whatever. Anyway, whatever it is, I think it makes sense to work out that first and then search for books that fit your interests. Of course, you can also just look at the books on your TBR and decide which ones to tackle this year. Basically, do what works for you. I made a video about my reading goals for this year, so I'm going to link to it in case you're interested and haven't seen it yet. But I would say that there are 3 things I want to achieve with my reading in 2021. One is read, and in some cases reread, the Russian classics, then read more in French. For that, I am focusing more on 20th century French fiction because one of my non-reading goals for this year is also to improve my French. And I would struggle with more archaic language and that wouldn't help me improve my French anyway. I also want to read more European fiction in general, some of it in translation. I want to tackle some big classics that I think it is high time I read. And last but not least, I also think that I want to read out of my comfort zone. And you'll see what I mean by that in a minute. Now, going back to my list, because I had to review it recently, I was able to realize which of those books I am the most looking forward to reading this year, and that gave me the idea for this video. I had a lot of fun making my TBR list this year, and I think it will be a good idea to review my TBR every 3 months or so, but I'll keep you posted on my progress. You might think also that this video would have made more sense a couple of months ago, but I actually think that it is never too late to set up reading goals, and I am a firm believer in reviewing your goals throughout the year. So I am hoping this video comes out at the right time for you. And because my TBR list includes about 80 books, even though I have already read more than 10, I think, it will take too long to talk about all those books in just one video. So instead, I'm going to just talk about the top 10 books I hope to read in 2021. So here we go. So let's start with the Russians. I have meant to read the Russians for the longest time, but I always found a reason to put off reading them. And I think that is why setting up goals helps, because if I don't decide that now is the time to read the Russians and write down the titles on a checklist, I would keep putting them off. Or I might read one Russian and then move on to something else completely different. So I'm glad I decided that 2021 would be the year when I would finally sit down and read the Russian classics. I have already read or reread some of them, and I have also reviewed a few already. So I'm going to link to my review of the Karamazov Brothers and Crime and Punishment, both by Dostoevsky, in case you haven't seen them and would like to check them out. By the time of filming this video right now, I haven't reviewed Anna Karenina by Tolstoy yet, but I have already read it. In fact, I've read it twice at this point. I intend to review Anna Karenina in the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for my Saturday book reviews because I will review it soon. But there are many more Russian classics I want to read in 2021. There are two that I am particularly looking forward to this year. The first one is Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol. Last year I read Gogol's short story The Overcoat. It was a buddy read with my good friend and fellow booktuber Sean from Sean the Book Maniac, and we both loved it. Usually short stories do not work for me. I am generalizing, of course, but often I find short stories unsatisfying and even frustrating. It is probably because I love coming back to the same story and the same characters day after day for at least a few days, and that's why I love big novels. But with The Overcoat, I didn't have that feeling of dissatisfaction. The story and its main character have both stayed with me, and the story was just the right length. I guess it just worked. So there and then I knew that I wanted to read more by Gogol, and because Dead Souls is his most famous novel, it was a no-brainer for me. I honestly do not know what to expect from Dead Souls. I mean, I know nothing about its plot. I guess I'm hoping to find some of what I liked in The Overcoat, that unique way of looking at the miseries of life in a moving yet at times funny way. I don't know, I remember laughing at specific passages in The Overcoat, but the story also moved me terribly. But I don't know if Dead Souls would have the same effect on me, and the only way to find out is by reading it, so we'll see. Okay, the other big Russian classic that I am most excited about is War and Peace by Tolstoy. I love Tolstoy and have read some of his novellas, and of course Anna Karenina. I love everything I have read by him, so I'm really excited about War and Peace. I think most people have heard about this epic novel that chronicles the French invasion of Russia in the Napoleonic era. The novel was, of course, written several decades later. I own this English translation by Amy Mandelker, which is only from 2010, but depending on how it goes, I might just read it in English or combine it with translations in Spanish, Portuguese, or French, possibly. I sometimes do that with books in translation. I always used to default to English translations, but I sometimes like translations in other languages, or I like combining several different translations. Now, War and Peace is one of the biggest books I hope to read in 2021, and there are a lot of big books I hope to read this year, so I don't know either when I will be able to get to it or when I will finish it, but I'm excited about picking it up at last. Okay, let's switch gears now and leave the Russians to one side. How about going to the US now, specifically the Old South? I love Hollywood classics from the 1930s and 40s, so I have watched Gone with the Wind quite a few times, but I have never read the novel by Margaret Mitchell upon which it is set. In my mind, this novel is the kind of popular literature that does not often raise my interest. However, this gorgeous hardback copy of the novel that reproduces the cover of the first edition has been sitting on my bookshelf for many years, so why not read it? Of course, I know the plot well, unless it is widely different from that of the movie adaptation, which I doubt. So I guess I'm curious to see if I find this novel as compelling as I do the movie. And I am also curious about how I would react to the racism in the novel. I am under no illusions about that, but perhaps the novel will surprise me pleasantly. I don't know. The only way to find out and be able to judge this novel will be to read it, and I am ready for it. And I can guarantee you right now, and right here, right now, that I will review Gone with the Wind when I read it. I don't know if I'm more excited to read it or to review it, to be honest, but I have to read it to review it, so I guess it doesn't matter. Okay, let's stay in the US because the next couple of books I'm going to talk about are American classics. The next book I am excited about reading in 2021 is the American modern classic novel, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. This novel is so beloved by so many people, and I have heard so many good things about it that I just cannot explain why it has taken me so long to read it. The Grapes of Wrath was definitely one of those novels that I added to my list because I feel I should have already read it. So I don't want to let another year go by when I don't read it. And I can also promise you that I will review The Grapes of Wrath almost as soon as I finish it. So keep an eye out on my Saturday reviews if you want to hear me discuss it. Now, the third American novel that I am anxious to read is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Moby Dick is one of the few classics that I am embarrassed not to have read yet. I started to read it once before, many years ago, and for some reason I quit at some point. There are 3 or 4 books by Melville I want to read as well, but I figured it would make sense to begin by what many people consider to be his masterpiece. I know that Moby Dick is a sprawling read, so I look forward to getting lost in it. Although, you know, I also already see myself struggling with all the stuff about whaling, but this time I will persevere and finish it. And I promise you also that almost as soon as I do that, I'll report back with a video review. Okay, let's go back to Europe. The next 4 novels I have are all European. From France, I hope to read In Search for Lost Time, or in French, À la recherche du temps perdu by Marcel Proust, another enormous book. In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust is one of the novels I am the most excited about. I plan to read it in the original French. I own this gorgeous boxed edition by Gallimard that has all 7 volumes in one. I love this edition, but I don't know how practical it would be to read it. That's why I also have the ebook version of all the 7 volumes individually arranged. Reading this will probably take me several months. I haven't planned on how I'm going to tackle it, but I will probably aim for a volume or 2 every month until I finish it. That way, as long as I started before the summer, I should be able to finish it before the end of the year. Now, I'm counting In Search of Lost Time as 1 book, but I'll probably track my reading and count it as 7 books on Goodreads, I think. Okay, the next French book I hope to read in 2021 is Journey to the End of the Night, or in French, Voyage au bout de la nuit by Céline. I know almost nothing about the plot of Journey to the End of the Night, but it is such a famous and highly critically acclaimed novel that it has always been on my radar. I'm not sure what to expect from it, to be honest, but I think it's probably going to be one of the most challenging novels on this list. I will try to read it in the original French, but I'll probably need help along the way. Journey is one of those 20th century novels that I feel I must read. If nothing else, I will read it so I can see why it is held up so highly by so many critics. And the third French novel on my top 10 list is Life, a Usurer's Manual, or in French, La Vie, Mode d'Emploi by Georges Perec. All I know about this is that it is a postmodern classic and it is considered to be one of the best French novels of all time. I haven't read much postmodern literature recently, and I'm curious about this one. Also, I just love the title, I think it's great. And I expect to be dazzled by this novel's originality. And talking about something dazzlingly original, another novel I think it is high time I read is Ulysses by the Irish writer James Joyce. I have read and studied some of Joyce's fiction before. I loved his novel A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and his short story collection Dubliners, but I have always put off reading Ulysses on purpose. First, because I thought it would be too difficult, and then, once I thought I was ready to tackle it, I read or heard somewhere that you need to be at least 40 before you read it. Now, that's most probably not true, and I am sure many people read Ulysses in their 20s and get a lot out of it. But in any case, I am now over 40, so I have no excuse. Now, when I compiled the list of books I hope to read in 2021, I made sure that I included every book I feel I should have read by now, and Ulysses just had to be on that list. Perhaps I'm being naive or overconfident, but I don't think I'll be overwhelmed by Ulysses. One of my favorite writers is Virginia Woolf, and if I didn't struggle with Mrs. Dalloway or The Waves, I do not see why I would find Ulysses particularly challenging. However, when I read it and review it, I will let you know whether I was right or not. So that's my top 9 list. Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, Moby Dick by Herman Melville, In Search for Lost Time by Marcel Proust, Journey to the End of the Night by Louis Ferdinand Céline, Life, a User's Manual by Georges Perec, and Ulysses by James Joyce. There is only one book left to complete my top 10. Remember that I said I wanted to read out of my comfort zone? Well, I'm not sure about fantasy. I have read and had a few forays into science fiction before, which I have more or less enjoyed, you know, the likes of Dune or stuff by the great Ursula K. Le Guin, but fantasy is a genre that has never appealed much to me. So this year, I hope to read the most famous and critically acclaimed fantasy novel of all time, The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm going to set aside any prejudices about fantasy fiction I may have and approach The Lord of the Rings with an open mind. My feeling is that I will probably regret not having read it when I was a teenager, but perhaps the book will surprise me and I will enjoy it as an adult. I will just read it as I will read all the other books on my list, no prejudices, but because it is something so different from what I usually read, I am thrilled to finally pick it up this year. So these are the 10 books I am the most looking forward to reading in 2021. I could have included many more, of course, but I think 10 books is more than enough to discuss on just one video. But now really, I would love to know what books you are hoping to read this year, so please let me know in the comment section below. And I hope to see you again very soon for another video, and remember that my book reviews come out every Saturday. Take care and bye for now.